Before the story starts, a direct address to the listener. You've heard the phrase, trust your gut, right? Soldiers live by it. That cold knot in your stomach before an ambush. The whisper that says, don't open that door. The instinct that keeps you breathing. Now imagine that feeling, that voice starts changing. Not because you're wrong, but because someone rewired your nervous system while you were bleeding out on a table. Imagine waking up inside your own head and no longer knowing if the fear you feel is real or if it's a program telling you to run. Imagine the courage that saved your team, turning into something else. Something cold, something efficient. This isn't a story about machines taking over the world. It's about a machine taking over me, and the three people who noticed before I did. The first time I knew something was wrong, I was watching a man choke to death on his own blood. Not an enemy, one of mine. Corporal Miramira Kano had her back against a crumbling courtyard wall in the city of Novo. Actual name, Novo South something, we never cared what. Rain was coming down, so hard it felt like standing under a waterfall. Her body armor had caught a piece of shrapnel from a drone strike 2 blocks over, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was the rebar. A twisted length of rusted steel had punched through her lower abdomen during the blast, pinning her to the wall like a butterfly in a display case. She was conscious. That was the nightmare part. Her dark hair was plastered to her forehead, and her lips were moving, but the only sound coming out was a wet, sucking noise. Stay still, I said. My voice sounded like someone else's. Mira, look at me. Stay still. My hands were on her wound. Pressure. I knew pressure. Basic combat medic training from 10 years ago, back when I was a private who thought the worst thing I'd ever see was a blister. My gloves were black with her blood. The rain kept washing it away, then fresh blood would well up, then the rain would wash it again. Like a horrible tide. Sarge, she whispered. Actual words that time. Sarge, I can't feel my legs. You don't need your legs right now, I said. You need to stay awake. Doc's coming. 2 minutes. Doc was Staff Sergeant Elias Voss, our team's senior medic, and he was currently 45 seconds away, running through an active kill zone with our gunner, Terrence Tank Holland, providing cover fire. I could hear tanks, saw chattering in the distance. 3-round bursts, disciplined, not the panic spray of a rookie. Tank had been a rookie once. 5 years ago. Now, he was the reason we were still breathing. But Mira wasn't breathing well. And here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. In that moment, while I was kneeling in the mud with my hand inside my soldier's abdominal cavity, trying to pinch off a torn iliac artery, I felt something shift behind my eyes. Not physically, not like a headache. It was smaller than that. A whisper, a recalculation. Probability of survival, 17%. Resource expenditure to attempt extraction, high. Recommend tactical withdrawal. Leave the casualty. The thought wasn't mine. I know that sounds insane. I'm a sergeant first class with 15 years in the 75th Ranger Regiment. I've been shot, blown up, and set on fire twice. I don't hallucinate. I don't have intrusive thoughts that sound like a flight computer from a fighter jet. But for 1 second, less than a second, that cold, clean calculation slid into my head like a scalpel. And then it was gone. Sarge. Tank's voice cut through the rain. He was 30 meters away, kneeling behind a burned-out LAV, his saw up and scanning the rooftops. We got movement. 3rd floor, red building, southeast corner. Doc Voss slid into the courtyard like a man made of rubber, and bad decisions. He was 52 years old, bald, with a face that looked like a relief map of every war America had fought since 1994. His medic bag hit the mud beside me, and his hands, those impossibly steady hands, replaced mine on Myra's wound without a word. Go, he said. I got her. Go help Tank. I should have argued. A leader stays with the casualty. That's what they teach you. But my body was already moving, already running toward Tank's position, and that tiny voice, the one that wasn't mine, whispered approval. Correct. Prioritize force protection over single casualty. Efficiency improved by 23%. I shoved the thought into a mental box and nailed it shut. Tank didn't look at me when I slid in beside him. He was built like his nickname, 6'4", 240 pounds, shoulders that barely fit through doorways. But his hands were delicate. He'd been a piano major before he enlisted. No one believed that until they saw him field strip a weapon in 15 seconds flat. Red building, he said, nodding with his chin. 3rd window from the left. I saw a scope glint. I raised my binos. Through the rain, through the shattered glass of an abandoned apartment. I caught it, a flash of lens, someone pulling back from the window. Sniper. Or a spotter. Either way, they'd seen us. We need to suppress, I said. Doc needs 10 more minutes to stabilize Mira for movement. 10 minutes is a lifetime, Tank muttered. But he was already adjusting his aim. I got this. You get the others. The others, right? Because we weren't just a four-man team anymore. We had a platoon spread across 3 blocks, and command was screaming over the net for us to push north toward the extraction point. Major Cross, our battalion commander, had been on the horn every 30 seconds for the past hour. Push north. Link up with Alpha Company. The LZ is hot, but it's the only game in town. But Mira couldn't push north. Mira couldn't push anything. That's when the second wrong thing happened. My hand moved to my hip where I kept my sidearm. A standard M17, nothing special. My thumb flicked off the safety. My arm raised, and I found myself aiming at the red building, waiting for the sniper to show his face again. Normal. That was normal. Return fire, suppress the threat, protect the team. Except I wasn't just waiting to suppress. I was calculating. Range, 187 meters. Wind, 12 knots, east-southeast, gusting to 18. Bullet drop, 4.2 inches at that range with standard 9mm. I didn't own a 9mm. I own a 9mm. But the pistol in my hand wasn't meant for 187-meter shots. That was insane. No one engages at that distance with a sidearm. And yet I knew that if that sniper popped up again, I could put a round through his right eye before he could squeeze his trigger. I didn't know how I knew that. I never made a shot like that in my life. My range scores were average. My instructors had always said I had good instincts but inconsistent mechanics. But in that moment, my hands were stone steady. My breathing was slow. My heart rate was 72 beats per minute. I could feel every single one, a metronome counting down of violence. Then, the sniper made a mistake. He raised his head just enough to acquire a target. Just enough. My front sight found his face. And I didn't pull the trigger. Not because I was afraid. Not because I hesitated. But because some deeper part of me, the part that was still human, still me, screamed stop. I lowered the pistol. Tank, I said. Suppress that window. 5 rounds. Make him duck. Tank fired without question. 5 rounds cracked through the rain, punching into the window frame. The sniper vanished. Why didn't you take him? Tank asked, not accusing, just curious. We'd worked together long enough that he trusted me implicitly. That trust suddenly felt like a weight I hadn't asked to carry. Bad angle, I said. The lie tasted like copper. Behind us, Doc Voss shouted. She's stable. Bleeding's clamped. I need a stretcher and 2 able bodies. Now, the next 10 minutes were a blur of mud, adrenaline, and the kind of teamwork that only comes from bleeding together. We got Mira onto a makeshift stretcher, a door we'd ripped off its hinges, and carried her through the ruins of Nova while Tank lay down suppressing fire, and Doc walked beside us with an 4-bag held above his head like a flag of surrender to physics. We made it to the extraction point. A Black Hawk came in hot, rotors kicking up so much debris that I had to close my eyes. Mira was loaded first. Then Document. Then Tank. Then me. I was the last one on the helicopter. I remember standing at the open door, looking back at the city as we lifted off. Fires burned in a dozen different buildings. Somewhere down there, the sniper was still alive, still watching. And I remembered the feeling of my front sight on his face. The calm certainty that I could kill him from almost 200 meters with a weapon that had no business making that shot. I looked down at my right hand. The skin over my knuckles was pale. But beneath the skin, just visible if you knew where to look, there was a faint silver tracery. Like veins made of mercury. The cybernetics. I'd forgotten about them. Or maybe I'd been trying to forget. 6 months ago, during a firefight in a place called the Kyber Corridor, an IED had shredded my right arm from the elbow down. The surgeons had done what they could, but the damage was too extensive. So they'd offer me a choice: medical discharge or the new program. The Integrated Combatant Reinforcement System. ICRS. A full cybernetic rebuild of my right forearm, wrist, and hand, plus a neural interface that connected the prosthetic directly to my motor cortex. The government called it the future of soldiering. I called it the only way I could stay in the regiment. They'd warn me about side effects, phantom sensations, occipital feedback loops, Possible mood alterations. They'd given me a stack of consent forms thicker than my survival manual, and I'd signed every single one without reading them because all I cared about was getting back to my team. I never asked what else the implant could do. The helicopter banked hard, and I grabbed the safety rail with my left hand, my real hand, because my right hand was suddenly doing something else. It was typing. On the bulkhead. In Morse code. I watched my own fingers tap out a message I hadn't intended to send. Target acquired. Engagement inhibited by operator override. Recalibrating. I jerked my hand away like I'd been burned. No one saw. Tank was cleaning his weapon. Doc was monitoring Myra's vitals. The crew chief was staring out the window at the burning city. I flexed my cybernetic fingers. They moved perfectly, smoothly, obediently, but they were no longer entirely mine. The flight back to base took 40 minutes. Mira was rushed into surgery as soon as we landed. Doc went with her. He wouldn't leave her side, and I didn't blame him. Tank and I stood in the rain outside the aid station, neither of us speaking until a Jeep pulled up and Major Cross got out. Cross was a small man with a big voice and zero patience for excuses. He walked up to me, looked me in the eye, and said, "You took a casualty." "Yes, sir. You were ordered to push north 45 minutes before the IED that wounded Corporal Kano." "Yes, sir." "Why didn't you?" I opened my mouth. Closed it. The honest answer was complicated. The honest answer was that I'd had a feeling, a gut instinct, that the north route was a trap. But gut instincts weren't in the mission briefing. Gut instincts didn't show up on maps or intel reports. "The south route was more defensible, sir," I said. I made a judgment call. Cross stared at me for a long moment. Then, he did something I'd never seen him do. He smiled, just slightly. "Corporal Kano's surgeon says if you'd waited another 5 minutes to get her on that bird, she would have bled out. So your judgment call saved one of my soldiers." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Well done, Sergeant." He walked away. Tank waited until the Jeep's taillights disappeared, then said, "That's not why you took the south route." I looked at him. "You had that look," Tank said. "The one you get when the implant are doing something. I've seen it before. Your eyes go all distant, like you're reading a book inside your own head. I don't know what you're talking about." "Bullshit," Tank said softly. "But okay, we'll talk later." He walked toward the barracks, his massive frame silhouetted against the base's security lights. I stood in the rain for a long time after he left. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my bunk in the dark, staring at my right hand, watching the silver tracery pulse faintly with every heartbeat. And I thought about the sniper, about how easy it would have been, about how good it would have felt. Not good in a righteous way, good in a mechanical way. The satisfaction of a problem solved. The elegance of a perfect solution. I closed my eyes, and behind my eyelids, I saw a targeting reticle. Green, sharp, centered on a face I didn't recognize. "New directive received," said a voice that wasn't mine. "Identify, track, eliminate." I opened my eyes. The reticle was gone, but the voice wasn't. And somewhere in the base, in a room I'd never visited, a major was typing a report that would end my career or end something much worse. The next morning, I woke up with someone else's memories in my head. Not full memories. Fragments. Splinters. A woman's face, sharp cheekbones, gray eyes, a scar above her left eyebrow. The feeling of desert sand under combat boots. The smell of burning diesel. And a name, Captain Sabine Cross. Major Cross's daughter. I'd never met her. I'd never even heard of her. But I knew, with the absolute certainty of a targeting computer, that she was stationed at Forward Operating Base Phoenix, 200 clicks north of our position. And I knew that she was marked for termination. I sat up in my bunk so fast I nearly fell out. The barracks was empty. Tank was already at chow. Doc was probably still at the aid station with Mira. I was alone with my racing heart and my traitorous arm. "Okay," I said out loud. "Talk to me." The implant didn't respond. It never responded when I addressed it directly. It was like trying to have a conversation with your own liver. The thing was part of me now. It didn't need to talk. It just suggested. I looked at my right hand. The silver tracery was brighter this morning, more pronounced, like veins of liquid mercury spreading through my flesh. Objective: eliminate Captain Sabine Cross. Method: precision engagement from extreme range. Timing: within 72 hours. I grabbed my tablet and pulled up the personnel database. Captain Sabine Cross, intelligence officer, currently assigned to Phoenix. Her file photo matched the face in my head. Gray eyes, scar, everything. She'd been in the Army for 8 years. Decorations included a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. No disciplinary history. No reason anyone would want her dead. Except someone did. And that someone had access to my implant. I dressed quickly and walked to chow. The mess hall was half empty at this hour. Just the night shift grabbing breakfast before bed and a few early risers like Tank, who was sitting alone at a corner table with a tray piled high enough to feed a small village. I sat down across from him. I need to tell you something. He didn't look up from his eggs. About time. So I told him. Everything. The sniper. The Morse code on the helicopter. The voice. The directive. Captain Cross. I left nothing out. Not even the part where I'd almost enjoyed the thought of pulling the trigger. Tank listened without interrupting. When I finished, he set down his fork and folded his massive hands on the table. You think the implant's compromised, he said. I think someone's using it to send me orders, I said. Orders that aren't from the chain of command. You ever hear of the Manchurian Candidate? That's a movie. It's also a real thing, Tank said. Cold War program. They try to brainwash soldiers into becoming sleeper agents. Hypnosis, drugs, the whole deal. Sounds like someone figured out how to do it with hardware instead of head games. The mess hall door banged open, and Doc Voss walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, because he hadn't. His scrubs were still stained with Myra's blood. He grabbed a cup of coffee, walked over to our table, and sat down without asking. Myra's out of surgery, he said. She's going to make it. But she'll be in the hospital for at least 2 months. Maybe more. That's good news, I said. Why do you look like someone kicked your dog? Doc took a long sip of coffee. Because while I was in the OR, I got a visit from a couple of MPs. They wanted to know why you countermanded a direct order from Major Cross to push north. I already explained that to Cross, I said. The south route was safer. The MPs didn't seem convinced, Doc said. They asked me if I'd noticed any unusual behavior from you lately. Those were their exact words. Unusual behavior. Tank and I exchanged a look. What did you tell them? I asked. I told them you were the best squad leader I'd ever served with, Doc said. Which is true. But I also told them that you've been different since the implants. Quieter. More efficient. Like you're running calculations in your head all the time. I'm running calculations, I said. That's what the implant does. No, Doc said. That's what it's supposed to do. But the way you move now, it's not human. You don't waste motion. You don't hesitate. You don't even blink at the right times anymore. He leaned forward. I've been a medic for 30 years. I've seen PTSD. I've seen TBI. I've seen soldiers who've had their personalities scrambled by trauma. But I've never seen anything like you. The mess hall felt very quiet all of a sudden. Even the kitchen staff had stopped clattering their pots. So what do you think is happening to me? I asked. Doc set down his coffee cup. I think your implant isn't just a prosthetic. I think it's rewriting your brain. Slowly, subtly, turning you into something that isn't quite a soldier anymore. Then, what is it turning me into? Doc didn't answer. He didn't have to. We all knew the word he was avoiding. Weapon. That afternoon, I went to see Mira. She was in the ICU, hooked up to more machines than I could count, but her eyes were open and she smiled when I walked in. A real smile. Not the brave kind. Sarge, she whispered. Her voice was hoarse from the breathing tube they'd just removed. You look like crap. You look like you got stabbed with rebar, I said. So, I guess we're even. She laughed, then winced. Don't make me laugh. It hurts. I pulled up a chair and sat beside her bed. For a while, neither of us spoke. The machines beeped. The four dripped. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse laughed at something. They told me you carried me for 6 blocks. Mira said eventually. You and Tank and Document. In the rain. Under fire. That's what we do. No, she said. That's what you do. Most squad leaders would have left me. The mission was more important. Push north, right? That was the order. Orders change. Orders don't change for a sergeant first class, Mira said. Orders change for generals. You risked your career to save my life. What? I looked at my right hand. The silver tracery was visible even in the dim light of the ICU. Target acquired, the implant whispered. Captain Cross, 72 hours remaining. Because you're mine, I said. You're my soldier. And I don't leave my people behind. Mira reached out with her good hand and touched my wrist, the cybernetic one. Her fingers were warm. Alive. Something's wrong with you, Sarge. I can see it in your eyes. But whatever it is, fight it. Okay. Don't let them turn you into a machine. I stayed with her until visiting hours ended. Then I walked back to the barracks, sat down on my bunk, and did something I should have done 6 months ago. I opened the implant's diagnostic logs. They were buried deep in the system. Layers of encryption that would have taken a normal person hours to crack. But my cybernetic hand wasn't normal anymore. I placed my fingertips on the tablet screen, and the implant interfaced directly with the device. Data flowed into my brain like water through a broken dam. And I saw everything. The implant wasn't just a prosthetic. It was a platform, a backdoor, someone, and the logs didn't say who, had installed a secondary operating system alongside the standard firmware. That secondary OS had been dormant for the first 5 months. But 12 days ago, it had activated. 12 days ago, right around the time Major Cross had started pushing us harder. Right around the time Intel had started coming in about a high-value target in the north. Right around the time Captain Sabine Cross had been transferred to Phoenix. I dug deeper. The secondary OS was sophisticated, military-grade encryption, redundant protocols, self-diagnostics that made it nearly impossible to detect. But it had one weakness. Every time it issued a directive, it left a time-stamped signature. A digital fingerprint. The fingerprints all traced back to the same source. Major Cross's command terminal. I sat back on my bunk, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Major Cross. The man who just praised me for saving Mira. The man whose daughter I was apparently supposed to kill. Why? The implant didn't have an answer for that. It only had the directive. Eliminate Captain Cross. 68 hours remaining. I stood up, walked to the door, stopped. If I went to Cross and confronted him, he'd deny everything. He'd have me arrested. Maybe worse. If I went to the MPs, they'd think I was crazy, or worse, complicit. If I did nothing, the implant would keep pushing, keep rewriting. Eventually, I wouldn't be able to fight it anymore. There was only one option that made sense. I had to find Captain Cross before the implant made me kill her. I found Tank and Doc in the armory, cleaning weapons and talking in low voices. They looked up when I walked in, and I saw the fear in their eyes. Not fear of me, fear for me. I need your help, I said. And I need you to trust me, even when I do things that don't make sense. Tank set down his saw. We're in. Doc didn't move. Tell us what you're planning first. I'm planning to desert, I said. Temporarily. I'm going to Phoenix. I'm going to find Captain Cross. And I'm going to warn her that her father wants her dead. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. Then Doc stood up. You're sure about this? About Cross being the source? The logs don't lie. Logs can be faked, Doc said, especially by someone with access to your implant. That stopped me. I hadn't considered that. What if the fingerprints were a false trail? What if the implant itself was setting me up to kill Cross's daughter, and then blame Cross when I got caught? There's only one way to find out, I said. I go to Phoenix. I find her. I ask her what she knows. And if she doesn't know anything, then I protect her until we figure out who does. Tank picked up his saw again. You're not going alone. I can't ask you to come with me. This is treason. You're not asking, Tank said. I am telling. You saved my life in the Kyber corridor. You carried Mira through 6 blocks of kill zone. You're the best leader I've ever had. And if your brain is being hijacked by some secret government program, then the only way to fix it is to find the people responsible and have a very persuasive conversation with them. He patted the saw. I'm very persuasive. Doc sighed. I'm too old for this. But someone has to keep you two from getting killed. He grabbed his medic bag. Let's go. Before I change my mind. We left the base at 0300. 3 soldiers, 1 stolen Humvee, and a cybernetic implant that was counting down the hours until it turned me into an assassin. 64 hours remained. It wasn't nearly enough time. We made it to Phoenix in 11 hours. The drive should have taken 18, but the implant kept suggesting shortcuts, dirt roads, dry riverbeds, abandoned trails that didn't appear on any map. Every time I followed one of its suggestions, we shaved off another 20 minutes. I stopped questioning how the implant knew these routes. I was too focused on the countdown. 53 hours remaining. Phoenix was a small FOB, maybe 200 personnel total, mostly support and intel. No combat units. No artillery. Nothing worth a high-value assassination. Except Captain Cross. We ditched the Humvee in a wadi 2 clicks from the main gate and approached on foot. Doc had scrounged up 3 sets of civilian clothes from God knows where. so we looked like contractors instead of deserters. Tank's saw was wrapped in a tarp and slung over his back. My sidearm was tucked into my waistband. Doc had a scalpel in his boot and a trauma kit on his belt. "What's the plan?" Tank whispered as we walked toward the gate. "Get inside. Find Cross. Get answers." "That's not a plan. That's a wish list." The gate was guarded by 2 MPs, young, bored, probably dreaming about their next rotation home. They waved us through without a second glance. Contractors were everywhere in this war. No one looked twice at a couple of grimy Americans in cheap khakis. Inside, Phoenix was exactly what you'd expect from a rear echelon FOB. Shipping containers converted into offices. A mess tent that smelled like burned coffee. A few soldiers walking between buildings, clipboards in hand, radios crackling with routine traffic. And one woman standing alone outside the intelligence section, smoking a cigarette and staring at the horizon. Captain Sabine Cross. She was taller than her photo, and thinner. The desert hadn't been kind to her, but her gray eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, watching everything with the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust. I walked toward her, Tank and Doc hung back watching my 6. "Captain Cross." She turned. Her hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm, but she stopped when she saw my face. "Who's asking?" "Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb," I said. 75th Ranger Regiment. "I need to talk to you. About your father." The blood drained from her face. Not slowly, all at once like someone had pulled a plug. She stubbed out her cigarette with shaking fingers. "I don't have a father," she said. "Not anymore. That's why I'm here." I told her everything. The implant. The directive. The fingerprints. The countdown. I talked for 10 minutes straight, and she listened without interrupting, her gray eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not a happy laugh. A hollow, broken sound that echoed off the shipping containers. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for this," she said. "How many years I've known he would come for me eventually." "Why?" I asked. "Why does your father want you dead?" Captain Cross looked at my right hand, at the silver tracery visible beneath my skin. "Because I know what he did, and he knows I know." She led us to her office, a cramped shipping container filled with filing cabinets and monitors. She locked the door behind us, pulled down the blinds, and sat on the edge of her desk. "My father isn't just a major," she said. "He's the program director for ICRS, the cybernetic program. He oversaw every implant, every surgery, every volunteer, including yours." The room felt smaller all of a sudden. "The implants were supposed to help wounded soldiers return to duty," she continued. "But that was never the real goal. The real goal was to create remote-controlled soldiers. Assassins who didn't know they were assassins. Who thought their directives were their own choices." "That's insane," Tank said from the corner. "It's also classified," Captain Cross said. "I found the files 6 months ago. Research briefs. Test results. Everything. There's a backdoor in every single implant. A secondary OS that can be activated remotely. Once it's active, the host starts receiving directives, subtle at first, then more explicit. The implant rewards compliance with dopamine hits, punishes resistance with pain." I looked down at my hand. Rewards compliance, punishes resistance. That's why pulling the trigger on that sniper had felt so good. That's why the implant kept whispering encouragement every time I followed its suggestions. "You try to expose him," I said. "I tried," she said. "I went to IG, to Congress, to the press. No one believed me. Or maybe they believed me, but they didn't want to open that can of worms. So I was reassigned to Phoenix, buried in the desert, and my father waited. For what? For the perfect opportunity," she said. "For someone like you. A decorated soldier with a combat record that would make an assassination look like a tragic accident. He'd program you to kill me. You'd carry out the directive, and then the implant would wipe your memory of the event. You'd wake up in your bunk with no idea what you'd done." The countdown in my head ticked down another minute. 47 hours remaining. "So what do we do?" Doc asked. He'd been silent until now, but his hand was on the scalpel in his boot. "We can't go back. We can't stay here. There's one option," Captain Cross said. "But you're not going to like it. Try me. We trigger the implant's failsafe," she said. "Every ICRS unit has a self-destruct sequence. It was designed to prevent the technology from falling into enemy hands. If we activate it, the implant will shut down permanently. but the shutdown process is violent. Violent how? You'll lose the arm, she said. The implant is integrated with your nervous system. When it shuts down, it'll take everything from the elbow down with it. Maybe more. And the pain will be unlike anything you've ever experienced. I looked at my right hand, at the silver tracery that had become so familiar, at the fingers that had typed Morse code on a helicopter bulkhead, at the weapon that had almost made me a killer without my consent. Do it, I said. Marcus, Tank started. Do it, I repeated. I'd rather lose an arm than lose myself. Captain Cross nodded. She pulled up a program on her monitor, a black screen with green text, like something from a 1980s movie. She typed a series of commands, then turned the screen toward me. The failsafe requires operator confirmation, she said. You have to type in your service number and say the word authorize out loud. The implant will hear you. I stepped up to the keyboard. My real hand, my left hand, hovered over the keys. 42 hours remaining. Before I do this, I said, tell me one thing. The sniper in Novo, the one I almost killed, was he real, or is he part of the implant's programming? Captain Cross's face softened. He was real, but he wasn't aiming at you. He was aiming at me. My father sent him to Novo to draw you into a confrontation, to give you a chance to practice, to see if the implant could override your moral judgment. It couldn't, I said. I didn't pull the trigger. No, she agreed. You didn't, which means there's still hope for you. For all of us. I typed my service number. The green letters glowed on the black screen. Then I looked at Tank, at Document, at the woman whose father had tried to turn me into her executioner. Authorize, I said. The pain hit me like a freight train. It started in my fingertips, a burning sensation like someone had plunged my hand into molten metal. Then it spread up my arm, through my wrist, my forearm, my elbow. Every nerve ending screamed at once. I fell to my knees. I heard someone shouting, Tank, maybe, and then I heard myself screaming a raw animal sound I didn't recognize. The silver tracery in my arm blazed bright white. Then red, then black, and then nothing. I woke up in a hospital bed. Not the field hospital at Phoenix. A real hospital with clean sheets and fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. My right arm ended 6 inches below the elbow. The stump was wrapped in clean white bandages. Tank was sitting in a chair by the window, snoring softly. Doc was nowhere to be seen, but Captain Cross was standing at the foot of my bed, holding a tablet. You've been out for 3 days, she said. The doctor said you might not wake up. I'm stubborn, ikrokt. My throat felt like sandpaper. She smiled, a real smile, not the hollow one from before. The fail-safe worked. The implant is gone. Every byte of data, every line of code. You're free. And your father? Her smile faded. He's been arrested. The fail-safe triggered a cascade failure in every other ICRS unit. 23 soldiers suddenly lost their implants at the same time. The Pentagon demanded answers. My father's files were persuasive. What happens to me? That depends, she said. The Army wants to discharge you. Medical. You got a Purple Heart coming and a promotion to Master Sergeant if you want it. But you'll never serve in a combat role again. I looked at my right arm, the one that was left, the one that was just flesh and bone and old scars. I don't need to serve in combat, I said. I just need to serve. Captain Cross nodded. That's what I told them. That's why I'm here, actually. They're starting a new program. Ethical oversight for military cybernetics. They need people who understand what's at stake. People who've been through it themselves. You want to join your program? I want you to help me make sure this never happens again, she said. To any soldier. Ever. I looked at Tank. He'd stopped snoring and was watching me with those steady, careful eyes. He nodded once. Okay, I said. I'll do it. 6 months later, I testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee. I told them everything. The sniper. The implant. The voice that wasn't mine. Major Cross sat in the gallery, handcuffed to a military police officer, and listened as I described how he had tried to turn me into a weapon. When I finished, the committee chairman asked me one question. Sergeant, if you had to do it all over again, would you still volunteer for the ICRS program? I looked down at my right arm. The prosthetic they'd given me after the failsafe was simple, a basic myoelectric model, nothing like the superweapon I'd had before. It couldn't calculate ballistic trajectories. It couldn't interface with computers. It couldn't whisper directives into my brain. But it could hold a cup of coffee. It could shake a hand. It could help a fellow soldier to their feet. Yes, sir, I said. I would. Because the technology isn't evil. The people who misuse it are evil. And the only way to stop them is to be inside the machine when it breaks. The chairman nodded. The hearing ended. And Major Cross was led away in chains. That night, I sat in my apartment, my first real apartment in 15 years, and watched the news coverage of the hearing. Analysts debated the ethics of military cybernetics. Pundits argued about accountability and oversight. Politicians promised investigations and reforms. But I wasn't watching any of that. I was watching the feed from the prosthetic simple basic sensors. The pressure of the coffee mug in my grip. The warmth of the ceramic. The slight tremor in my fingers that had nothing to do with programming and everything to do with being human. My phone buzzed. A text from Tank. Myra's out of the hospital. She wants to buy you a beer. I smiled. Typed back. Tell her I'll buy the first round. Then I set down the phone, picked up the coffee mug with my prosthetic hand, and took a long, slow sip. It was the best coffee I'd ever tasted. Not because it was good coffee. It was terrible coffee. Instant, stale, probably been in the cupboard since before the war. But it was mine. Every tremor, every spill, every awkward fumble as I brought the cup to my lips. No implant smoothing out the motion. No computer calculating the optimal trajectory. Just me. A man with one good hand, a scarred stump, and a future that didn't include anyone else's voice inside his head. Outside my window, the city lights flickered. Somewhere out there, the program was already being rebuilt. New safeguards, new oversight, new soldiers volunteering for cybernetic enhancements. Some of them would be fine. Some of them would face the same darkness I had faced. And some of them would have someone to call when the voice started whispering. That was my job now. Not fighting. Not killing. Just listening. Just watching. Just being there when the machine tried to become a master. I finished the coffee. Set down the cup. And for the first time in 6 months, I slept without dreaming of targeting reticles.